I'd like to invite Dr. Shanti Naidu to continue with our discussion further and enlighten us about her experience. Before we start, let me introduce her. Dr. Shanti K. Naidu, consultant clinical biochemist, graduated from SV Medical College, Tirupati in 1979 and specialized in medical biochemistry with clinical chemistry from Madras Medical College in 1983. She's worked in Kidwai Memorial Institute of Oncology, Bangalore, a tertiary care and teaching hospital, and Nizam's Institute of Medical Sciences, that's NIMS Hyderabad. She's also been the head of biochemistry department in a medical college. She's a postgraduate teacher, a guide for many projects and theses of paramedical and medical students. She's a PhD guide for NTR Health University and Savita University, and trained at National Teachers Training Center at JIPMER, Pondicherry, and holds a PG diploma in clinical trial management from ICMR. She is nominated corresponding member of CKD Task Force of the International Federation of Clinical Chemistry, and she's an AMBI's national representative to IFCC and AFCB. I can go on and on about her because she's such a senior biochemistry, and we all know her, but this was to just briefly summarize as much as possible. So I think I can welcome Dr. Shanti Naidu to kindly start her presentation and talk on tumor markers in fluids. It's a very topic that is least talked upon as yet, and with more and more cancer therapies being invented, and it becomes more at the most important as a screening tool. So Dr. Shanti Naidu, please.
Thank you, ma'am. I never expected that the whole brief CV was supposed to be read. I thought you'll just take out the points and put it. Anyway, thank you so much. And thank you for having me here. It is indeed a pleasure. And I have noticed that nothing has been said about tumor markers so far. And since you've given me very little time, I will try to do the best. At the beginning itself, I would like to say that my experience in practically doing tumor markers in the fluids is actually negligible. We hardly get any requests for tumor markers in fluids. Once in a way, we do get it. Indeed, a pleasure. And I would like to say that what I'm presenting is mostly from literature, because I have very little experience in the tumor markers in the fluids. And as I have mentioned on my slide, it is not routinely asked. For what reason, I really wouldn't know, because maybe clinicians have not accepted that fluid markers would be more useful or equally useful as the serum ones. And whenever we go through literature, what we see is usually an academic study of a collection of cases in a particular diagnosis or differentiation of for differential diagnosis. But routinely, it has not been done anywhere. And I'm sure biochemists sitting there will also say the same thing, that they don't get requests often. But it is indeed fast gaining importance, because now literature is flooded with the different types of markers that we may be able to use. And the debate still goes on. Should we go for the serum or the fluid, or should we do both? But to do both is a very expensive affair, and for or against is the topic or the buzzword. And most of the studies have been usually associated only with pleural or ascitic fluid, and not with many others, as I will mention. Now, going on to the pleural fluid one, all these tumor markers which we are familiar with in the serum have been used in pleural effusion. And analysis of 116 cases is from this study and a review of literature. It is said that these markers help in establishing diagnosis of a pleural malignancy. But does it offer a precise diagnostic value? And when it doesn't, why should we waste our time or money on this? This study revealed elevation of markers in the malignant group as expected. And since all the markers were done, all of them showed a good elevation compared to serum or by themselves alone in the fluid. It is said that CEA, CA 15.3 and The cytokeratin yielded good results. And in this particular study, it is said for pleural effusion, CEA was more significantly elevated and was followed by the other two. But how do we get this conclusion for us to go into daily practice? It is only a review of 116 cases, and such reviews are only in the literature. But it is mentioned also, patients with unexplained pleural effusion and negative cytology should be assayed for fluid markers. But as literature states, we can narrow down the type of tumor markers that we have for a particular diagnosis, which may come from radiology or a clinical suggestion. Now the second high review was the diagnostic value of bronchoalveolar lavage fluid and the tumor markers in that. The study groups included, as usual, the benign and lung cancer patients. The study groups included squamous cell carcinoma, adenocarcinoma, and undifferentiated carcinoma. The marker studied here with emphasis was on neuron-specific enolase, whereas some of the earlier papers did not use this. And it was found that NSE was high in small lung cancer, and the cytokeratin was high in squamous cell carcinoma, and CE elevation in adenocarcinoma. Now, even to arrive and narrow down the tumor markers to that particular diagnosis, we would already have to have either a cytological diagnosis or a histopathology. When you have that, what purpose would this serve? It was found that fluid detection of markers was better than it was better than serum in many cases, and it would be advisable for the clinician to include it in his routine practice. But as I said, we don't have even cutoffs. All cutoffs are from the few cases that people have published in literature. And each center has a different cutoff. And as we know in the test that we do, there will be so many other factors depending on the instrument that we use, etc., etc. So I think to get this into a routine practice would be a difficult task unless one is absolutely dedicated to this. And mentioning again that we narrow down the tumor marker according to a clinical diagnosis. Now, when you have a clinical diagnosis, which at least in 80% or 90% is giving you the right clue what to do for the treatment, why would you want to do this? The next one is this analysis of tumor marker CA125 in saliva for normal and oral squamous cell carcinoma patients. This is a very good paper which says that saliva, when tested for CA125, gave an accurate diagnosis, and it would be easier, it would be non-invasive. And since these tumors are difficult to access as an invasive procedure, this salivary test of CA125 yielded good results and correlated with the clinical situation. And it is also seen in epithelial cancers like ovarian, breast, and oral. And it could be a marker. And we know that salivary markers are now gaining a lot of importance in routine practice of biochemistry. So it would be definitely better to do a salivary test for this. Now, the next important thing is, this is something that we have read about, the Regan's isoenzyme, but never actually practiced it in the labs at a high scale unless it was a small study for postgraduate students. Now, the placental alkaline phosphatase has a very high diagnostic value for intracranial germ cell tumors. A 10-year study, which is the largest study for this, is a study of 74 patients, and with their CSF and histological samples, this marker was done, and it was found to be very sensitive and specific. And now this is something that is going to come into practice on a routine basis. But as all markers of such type have their own inhibitions of hook factor, and then it is going to be a problem and will take some time. Now, having said that very briefly, I would like to say that there are a lot of papers which say, is doing fluid markers a futile attempt? This particular paper, which I have mentioned there, does say that it is a futile attempt and nobody should waste their time. But in the literature, there are papers which are for tumor markers better, for fluid markers better than the serum markers. And another heartening study is that of CA125, CEA, and 99 levels, which answer peritoneal carcinomatosis and in GI and ovarian malignancies, and this was found to be useful. So since I have practically not worked on this, I have just taken statements from literature, from a large literature studies, and I have put in some points. I'm willing to answer any questions why I wouldn't do it and or why I would do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for that insight. I guess the basic idea about tumor markers in fluids probably analysis is that you are, as it is going, the clinicians are tap the fluid for other tests. So doing some more tests, because it's not like serum where we can take it multiple samples. So once the fluid is there, we can even add on to the information that is already available to the clinician. And especially in stage 4 diseases or where there is no other available, maybe tumor markers can give some hope. That was a basic idea of asking you to present on this. But like you have said, that some have said that it is futile. And yes, sure, even we have very little experience. And if a biochemist of your experience has not yet worked, I guess there is a lot of work yet to be done. You could tell us that the fluid tumor markers, whether it is just for academic or whether do you think that it really has some clinical value?
As I expressed earlier, my experience in this is very, very limited. I would feel that since we do have serum markers, some of them do not answer all the questions. And anyway, the clinician would not take the fluid tumor marker numerical value as a final to make his decision. He would definitely depend on the cytology or the histopathological picture along with the radiological features. And I think it would be a waste of money. But in situations, like I said, in the germ cell tumors, in the brain and all, yes, it would be useful. Where we are not able to get the other modalities, it would be useful to compare both serum and the fluid that we are talking about, and it would throw light. But I suppose everything increases by experience. And if we do get more requests, I think labs will be in a better place to do it. Because even cutoffs, as mentioned in the various manufacturers' instructions, etc., are not very defined. Neither does the lot of papers that have been published. They do not give any cutoffs. They just say in their study it was this. And I think that becomes a problem unless clinicians keep regularly sending, depending on this, trying to make a new modality. I don't think it would be useful.
About synovial fluid, how useful it is in managing your patients, and what are your expectations about that? You must have definitely faced this problem that you are not being able to do biochemical tests in synovial fluids. So yes,
no, we do a lot of synovial fluids, both from rheumatologists and orthopedicians, etc. And over the years, what we have learned is that you can do this on smaller instruments where you take a sample blank. Because now we are so much into automation, many of our so high-end laboratories do not keep simpler instruments. And that is where the flaw is. If you have a semi-automated machine or a colorimeter, you can take a sample blank of a viscous fluid or a highly colored fluid and then do it, you will get a perfect answer. Or as suggested by in the beginning by Aparna, who she was talking to, they said you can dilute with saline, but dilution comes only if you have checked the sample blank. If the sample blank is able to nullify when you do the actual test, you get accurate results. It's not so difficult, but the sad thing is we are so into high-end automation, we forget simple things.
Yes, ma'am, this is exactly.
You have Charlie or Lynch by your side all the time.
Yes, ma'am. And what about the viscosity of the fluid, ma'am? Have you not faced problems regarding that?
Yeah, when it is viscous, then you dilute with saline, see how much of dilution it takes, and then you can always counter check it on a higher dilution on an automated system to see the accuracy.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am, for that input. Last question before we end our session. Diagnosis of fluid and blood for tumor markers in fluid. Ma'am, for monitoring purpose or for any other, if you can answer.
Since we are familiar with serum, I would say we can monitor with serum. And that is very good because you possibly cannot do invasive procedures, especially if we talk about myelomas, where we do a lot of serum light chains in the urine. Yes. Or when we have amyloidosis and all, those are examples which we actually don't talk about on a routine basis. But monitoring light chains even in the urine is very useful. And even in the CSF, when we look for oligoclonal bands, you can do the transferrin and then see that what is happening, or whether you have, you can run a simple high resolution electrophoresis and monitor for multiple sclerosis, etc. So once you are doing something on a regular basis, and as it was said, a lot of crosstalk has to be with the clinician. If many of us seniors are sitting where we are sitting, is because we have spoken to our clinicians, we learn from our clinicians. I don't know if they accept that they learn from us, but we do learn from them. And unless we have a crosstalk with our clinicians, I don't think labs can ever progress.
Somebody had asked about capillary blood glucose. Can capillary blood glucose be used instead of serum glucose if you're going to compare it to CSF glucose?
Capillary yields about 15 milligrams, 10 to 15 milligrams more than the plasma or the venous blood. So both are more or less the same. But when you're monitoring, it would be better to monitor in the same way. But now that we do a lot of home testing, at least if you are not a controlled diabetic, it would ideally be good to do it at least plasma glucose once in 3 months. When you, of course, check your HbA1c according to your control of yourself. So it is acceptable, but capillary glucose, yes, is acceptable. Because what we do on our glucometer is only capillary glucose.
Right.
Thank you. Dr. Naidu, there's a question. When Light's criteria fail to categorize exudate, then which biochemical test should be chosen for differentiation between exudate and transudate?
We only depend on the protein content and the physical appearance of the fluid, whether there's a coagulum, etc. I don't think we do any other test. I don't know if Seema is there, whether she can answer that. Dr. Seema, can you answer that?
I'm very much here, and I totally agree with you, Dr. Shanti.
I don't think we do any other test.
No, I don't think so either. I was looking forward to something different from you.
I would only like to say that now, although we have been speaking about these things over the years, but now this hemolysis, lipemia, ICTRIC samples are put under the category of HIL. So what people are trying to do is they are giving cutoff levels for the hemolysis, how much of hemolysis would interfere with the potassium assay, how much of lipemia would interfere with other assays. We never had cutoffs. We just say this is lipemic and therefore it's an artifact, etc. But a lot of work is being done to give cutoff levels of these HIL parameters to a particular numerical to say whether it is an artifact or a true value.
Well, thank you all.